My name is Denise, 35 years old, and a single mother to Emma and Jake, ages 10 and 7. This year has been tough. I spent over $24,000 helping my mom keep her house, cutting back on everything for my own kids. I thought Thanksgiving would bring us together. Instead, Mom threw us out during dinner, telling me my sister Marlene was her real child. As I stood there watching the door slam in our faces, I made a decision that would change everything. Before I start this story, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you have ever felt betrayed by someone you sacrificed everything for. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Westfield, Ohio. Our house was modest but comfortable, with a big backyard where neighborhood kids would gather to play. From my earliest memories, I always felt like I was living in my younger sister Marlene's shadow. Though only 2 years apart, the difference in how our mother treated us was impossible to ignore. When Marlene brought home a B on her report card, there was celebration and ice cream. When I brought home straight A's, there was a nod and, "That's what you're supposed to do." When Marlene needed new clothes, she got a shopping spree. When I needed new shoes, I got lectures about being careful with money. Our family dynamic changed drastically when I was 14 and Marlene was 12. Dad announced one evening that he had fallen in love with his administrative assistant and was leaving. Mom collapsed emotionally, and overnight I became the emotional support for both her and my sister. Dad had always been the financial provider. Mom had worked part-time at a local boutique, more for social interaction than income. After the divorce, money became tight. Dad paid child support, but it wasn't enough to maintain our previous lifestyle. Mom had to take on a full-time job as a receptionist at a dental office, but she struggled with the adjustment. Despite the challenges, I managed to graduate high school with honors and earned a partial scholarship to Ohio State. I worked 2 jobs to cover the remaining costs, often sending money home to help Mom and Marlene. During my junior year, I met David in an economics class. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed to genuinely care about my dreams and goals. We married right after graduation and moved back to Westfield so I could be close to Mom. David got a job at a local marketing firm, and I followed 6 months later. We bought a small starter home 3 blocks from Mom's house. Emma came along 2 years later, and Jake 3 years after that. Life was busy, but fulfilling. Then 3 years ago, David announced he was leaving. The parallels to my father's departure were eerie. David had fallen for a coworker, a 25-year-old graphic designer who apparently understood his creative spirit better than I did. Just like that, I became a single mother juggling a career in marketing while trying to give my children stability and security. The divorce settlement was fair on paper. David paid child support on time, but it didn't cover the emotional cost of his absence or the practical realities of raising 2 children alone. I took on additional projects at work for extra income, often staying up until 2 in the morning to complete them after the kids were asleep. Around the same time as my divorce, Mom's financial situation worsened. The roof on her house started leaking, and she called me in tears about the estimate for repairs. Without thinking twice, I paid the $8,000 for a new roof. It was most of my savings, but I couldn't let her live under a leaking roof. That was just the beginning. Over the next 3 years, I became increasingly responsible for keeping Mom afloat financially. This past year alone, I spent $24,000 helping her. The breakdown was painful when I added it all up. $800 monthly for her mortgage payments when she claimed she couldn't make them. That's $9,600 for the year. $4,000 for property taxes she forgot to budget for. $3,000 for a new furnace last winter when hers died during a cold snap. $2,000 for dental work she'd been postponing. $1,200 to fix her car after an accident. Various smaller emergencies and bills throughout the year that added up to another $4,000. All while I was putting off repairs on my own home. The kids' bathroom faucet had been leaking for months. Emma needed braces, but I had to delay the treatment. Jake's asthma medication was expensive even with insurance. I cut back on everything from groceries to my cell phone plan. I stopped getting haircuts, bought clothes at thrift stores, and canceled streaming services the kids enjoyed. Meanwhile, my sister Marlene lived just 20 minutes away in a beautiful new construction home with her husband Troy. They both had well-paying jobs and no children. Marlene visited Mom weekly for coffee and brought flowers occasionally, but never offered financial support. "Marlene and Troy are just starting out," Mom would say. "They need to establish themselves." Marlene and Troy traveled to Cancun twice that year. They bought a new SUV. Troy golfed every weekend at the country club. Yet somehow they were just starting out, while I, a single mother struggling to keep both households afloat, was expected to handle everything because I was established. Small incidents throughout the year highlighted the imbalance. When Mom needed a ride to a doctor's appointment, Marlene was too busy at work, despite her flexible schedule as a remote website designer. I took time off losing income to drive Mom. When Mom's birthday came around, Marlene gave her a bouquet and took her to lunch. I paid for a weekend trip to a spa resort Mom had mentioned wanting to visit for years. Mom came back gushing about how Marlene had found her the perfect birthday card that really showed she knows me. Despite everything, I never stopped trying to earn my mother's approval. I never stopped hoping that one day she would see my sacrifices and value them. I never stopped believing that family meant showing up for each other even when it was difficult. That belief was what made me so excited about hosting Thanksgiving this year. October had just ended when Mom mentioned that her oven was acting up again. "I don't think it will make it through the holidays," she sighed dramatically during our Sunday phone call. "I guess we'll have to go to a restaurant for Thanksgiving this year." I couldn't bear the thought of spending Thanksgiving in a crowded restaurant with tired servers missing their own families. "Why don't I host at your house?" I suggested. "I can bring all the food prepared and just warm things up. The kids and I can come early and decorate." "Oh, that would be wonderful," Mom responded, sounding genuinely pleased for once. "You always did know how to make the holidays special, Denise." That small compliment fueled me for weeks. I started planning immediately, creating Pinterest boards with decoration ideas the kids could help with. Emma and Jake spent weekends cutting out paper turkeys and creating hand-traced, thankful placemats for everyone. "Will Aunt Marlene and Uncle Troy be there?" Emma asked as she carefully wrote Grandma on a place card. "Yes, sweetie, it will be all of us together," I assured her. "Can I sit next to Grandma?" Jake asked, looking up with hopeful eyes. "We'll see, buddy. We'll work out the seating when we get there," I replied, not wanting to make promises I couldn't keep. Mom usually preferred Marlene beside her at family gatherings. 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I started shopping for ingredients, catching items on sale when possible. Turkey potatoes, fresh vegetables, cranberries, pumpkin for pies, pecans for Mom's favorite pecan pie. I stored what I could in the freezer and cleared my schedule for the 3 days leading up to Thanksgiving for cooking. Those 3 days were exhausting, but filled with purpose. I took vacation days from work, but still had to check emails and attend one virtual meeting. Between work obligations, I baked pies, prepared casseroles, brined the turkey, and made homemade rolls that were my grandmother's recipe. The kids helped where they could, Jake proudly mashing potatoes and Emma rolling out pie dough with determined precision. Thanksgiving morning arrived with a crisp chill in the air. I woke the children early, helping them into the special outfits I'd purchased weeks before. Emma wore a burgundy dress with a small turkey embroidered on the collar, and Jake had khaki pants with a sweater featuring subtle fall leaves along the hem. "You both look so wonderful," I told them as I snapped photos on my phone. "Grandma is going to be so happy to see you." We carefully packed all the prepared food into coolers and containers, loading them into the trunk of my sedan. The turkey, nearly done, was wrapped in foil and towels to keep warm. The mashed potatoes were in a slow cooker that I could plug in upon arrival. Casseroles were covered in foil, ready for a quick reheat. Pies were balanced carefully on the floor of the back seat. The 15-minute drive to Mom's house was filled with excited chatter from the kids. "Do you think Grandma will like my placemat?" Jake asked for the 3rd time. "She's going to love it," I reassured him. When we arrived, Mom opened the door wearing a new blouse I hadn't seen before. Her hair was freshly colored and styled, something she rarely splurged on. "You look beautiful, Mom," I said, giving her a careful hug while balancing a container of cranberry sauce. "Thank you, dear. Here, let me help you with that," she replied, taking the container. "The kids can put their things in the guest room." As Emma and Jake scampered off with their small backpacks of activities, I made multiple trips to the car, bringing in all the food. Mom hovered in the kitchen, occasionally moving items around on the counter as I organized. "I set the dining room table already," she mentioned. "I got out the good china." I peeked into the dining room and noticed the table was set for 8. "Are we expecting more people?" I asked, returning to the kitchen. "I thought it was just us 5. Mom busied herself rearranging napkins. Oh, well, Marlene mentioned she might bring a couple of friends who don't have family in town. I hope that's okay. Before I could respond, she changed the subject. The centerpiece looks a bit sparse. Maybe we should add some of those decorations the children made. I swallowed my concerns and called the kids to help decorate the table. As they proudly placed their handmade items around the centerpiece, I noticed Mom discreetly removing Jake's somewhat lopsided paper turkey and replacing it with Emma's more polished creation. By 2 o'clock, everything was ready. The turkey was resting, sides were warming, and the house smelled like all the Thanksgivings of my childhood. The kids were watching the Thanksgiving parade recording in the living room when the doorbell rang. "That must be Marlene," Mom said, hurrying to the door with more energy than she'd shown all day. Voices in the entryway confirmed it was indeed my sister, but I froze when I heard multiple people greeting my mother. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the kitchen to say hello. Marlene stood in the entryway looking like she'd stepped out of a Thanksgiving catalog. Her burgundy sweater dress complemented her perfectly highlighted hair, and her makeup was flawless. Beside her, Troy looked equally polished in dress pants and a cashmere sweater. Behind them stood another couple I didn't recognize, both similarly well-dressed and carrying bottles of expensive-looking wine. "Denise," Marlene exclaimed with practiced warmth. "Happy Thanksgiving, this is James and Patricia. They work with Troy at the investment firm." "Nice to meet you." I managed, suddenly conscious of my practical sweater and slacks chosen for cooking comfort rather than style. "I didn't realize we were having additional guests." "Mom didn't tell you?" Marlene asked with a slight frown. "I mentioned it weeks ago. James and Patricia are new to the area and don't have family nearby." "It must have slipped my mind," Mom interjected quickly. "Denise has been so busy I probably told her and she forgot." I knew for certain she hadn't told me, but arguing would only create tension. "Well, the more the merrier," I said instead. "We have plenty of food." As everyone moved into the living room, Marlene pulled me aside. "The table looks interesting," she whispered. "Did you let the kids decorate? It's a bit childish for adult guests, don't you think?" Before I could defend my children's efforts, she continued, "I brought some proper napkin rings and place cards. I'll just make a few adjustments before we sit down." I returned to the kitchen, taking a moment to compose myself. Through the doorway, I could hear Mom proudly showing James and Patricia her collection of souvenir spoons, a story I'd heard countless times. She never mentioned that I had purchased many of those spoons for her over the years, finding them in antique shops and on my rare vacations. When I brought out a tray of appetizers, Marlene was already rearranging the table, removing most of the children's decorations. Emma noticed immediately. "Aunt Marlene, where did my turkey go?" she asked, her voice small. "Oh, sweetie, it was a bit crowded on the table with all these grown-ups coming," Marlene replied without looking up. "I put your crafts on the side table where everyone can see them." I glanced at the side table where the children's carefully made items were piled haphazardly next to a stack of coasters. Troy and his friends were discussing the stock market, their voices carrying through the house. Jake approached them, eager to show Troy a new video game trick he'd learned. "Not now, buddy," Troy said dismissively. "We're talking business. Go play with your sister." Jake's face fell, and I quickly called him to help me in the kitchen, giving him the important job of arranging crackers on a plate. "When are we eating, Mom?" he whispered. "I'm getting hungry." "Soon, sweetheart," I promised. "Very soon." By 4:30, we were finally seated around the dining table. Mom had placed Marlene at her right hand with Troy beside her. James and Patricia sat across from them. I was at the far end with Emma and Jake on either side of me, as far from Mom as the table arrangement allowed. The turkey looked perfect as I placed it on the table. The golden skin crackled slightly as I set it down on the trivet Mom had positioned at the center of the table. "That looks store-bought," Marlene commented with a small laugh. "Did you actually make it or just heat it up?" "I brined it for 2 days and baked it this morning," I replied evenly, trying to keep the edge from my voice. "Well, it looks lovely," Patricia offered, seemingly sensing the tension. As we passed dishes around, I noticed James and Troy exchange looks when Jake accidentally dripped some gravy on the tablecloth. "Sorry," Jake whispered, looking frightened. "It's fine, honey," I assured him quickly, blotting the small spill. "That tablecloth was a gift from your grandmother," Mom said with a sigh. "Please be more careful, Jake." Children will be children, Patricia said with a tight smile. Though my sister's kids know better than to make messes at the adult table. Perhaps they should have their own table next time. I felt my cheeks flush but kept silent. Emma, always sensitive to atmosphere, sat perfectly still, barely touching her food. Before we eat, Mom announced, I'd like to say a prayer of thanks. We all bowed our heads as Mom began. Dear Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day and for bringing us together. We're especially thankful for Marlene and Troy, who always bring such joy into my life, and for their wonderful friends James and Patricia, who have joined our family celebration. Thank you for the food before us. Amen. Not a word about me or my children. Not a mention of the meal I had spent days preparing. Not a single acknowledgement of my presence or contributions. As everyone began eating, compliments flowed freely for dishes they assumed Marlene or Mom had prepared. This stuffing is exceptional, James commented. Thank you, Marlene replied, though I had made every bit of it from scratch. And these rolls are divine, Patricia added. Old family recipe, Mom said, not mentioning that I was the one who had woken up at 5 that morning to bake them fresh. I took a deep breath and decided to speak up. I'm glad everyone is enjoying the food. It was a labor of love preparing everything these past few days. Denise did bring most of the food, Mom acknowledged with a dismissive wave. My oven isn't working properly. Speaking of which, I said carefully, I wanted to talk about the new oven I ordered for you, Mom. It should be delivered next week. The table went quiet. You ordered Mom a new oven? Marlene asked, her tone sharp. Without consulting any of us. I thought it would be helpful since the current one is failing, I explained. It's within the budget of what I normally help with each month. Troy cleared his throat. Always bringing up money, aren't you, Denise? That's a bit tasteless at the dinner table. I felt heat rising in my face. I wasn't bringing up money, I was just mentioning the oven. Let's not discuss financial matters at Thanksgiving, Mom interjected with a nervous laugh. Marlene, tell everyone about your new project with that tech company. As Marlene launched into a detailed description of her latest web design client, I focused on helping Jake cut his turkey into smaller pieces. Emma had barely touched her food, her eyes darting anxiously between the adults. Are you feeling okay, sweetheart? I whispered. She nodded slightly, but continued pushing food around her plate. The conversation flowed around us with Troy, James, and Patricia laughing at Marlene's witty commentary about difficult clients. Mom beamed at my sister, occasionally touching her arm affectionately when Marlene made a particularly clever remark. I tried several times to join the conversation, mentioning a successful marketing campaign I'd recently completed or sharing a funny story about the children's school, but each attempt was met with polite nods before someone changed the subject back to Marlene's work or Troy's recent promotion. Halfway through the meal, Jake accidentally knocked over his water glass. The water spread quickly across the table, seeping into the tablecloth and dripping onto Patricia's designer handbag that she'd placed by her chair. Oh my goodness, Patricia exclaimed, jumping up and grabbing her bag. I'm sorry, Jake said, his voice trembling. This is why children should have their own table, James muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Jake, how could you be so careless? Mom snapped. That tablecloth is an heirloom. It was an accident, I said firmly. He didn't mean to. Well, accidents have consequences, Troy stated as he helped Patricia inspect her purse for damage. That bag costs more than most people's monthly salary. I felt a flash of anger. He's 7 years old. It was water, not wine. The tablecloth will dry and the bag looks fine. Always making excuses for your children's behavior, Marlene said with a tight smile. This is why they're so undisciplined. My children are not undisciplined, I replied, struggling to keep my voice level. They're well-behaved children who occasionally make mistakes, as all children do. Perhaps if they had a more stable home environment, Mom suggested, her tone laced with disapproval. What is that supposed to mean? I asked. Just that children need structure, 2 parents, consistency. Mom looked pointedly at Marlene and Troy. When you and Marlene were growing up, things were different, before your father left. I didn't choose for David to leave, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. And despite being a single parent, I've managed to raise kind, responsible children while also supporting my own household and contributing significantly to yours." The table went silent. "There you go again, bringing up money," Marlene said with an exaggerated sigh. "We all help Mom in our own ways." "Do you?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Because I've spent $24,000 this year alone helping Mom with her mortgage, taxes, home repairs, and medical bills. What exactly have you contributed?" "Denise," Mom gasped. "That's completely inappropriate." "Is it?" I pressed. "Is it inappropriate to acknowledge reality? I've been working 60-hour weeks and cutting back on necessities for my children to help keep you afloat financially. Meanwhile, Marlene and Troy take luxury vacations and buy new vehicles, but they're too financially strained to help their own mother." Marlene laughed, a cold sound that held no humor. "Oh, here comes the martyr act. Nobody asked you to spend that money, Denise. You choose to do it, probably to lord it over everyone and make yourself feel important." "That's not fair," I said, feeling tears threatening. "I do it because family helps family, because Mom needed help." "Well, maybe if you hadn't gotten divorced," Troy started, "you'd have more resources and wouldn't be so bitter about helping out." Emma made a small sound beside me, something between a gasp and a sob. I placed my hand over hers under the table. "I think it's time we addressed the elephant in the room," Marlene announced, setting down her fork. "Denise has always used money as a way to control situations. She flaunts her contributions while conveniently ignoring all the non-financial support I provide to Mom." "Like what?" I challenged. "Emotional support, quality time, actually listening to Mom instead of just throwing money at problems and expecting gratitude." "That's right." Mom nodded. "Marlene calls me every day. She takes me shopping. She includes me in her life." "And I don't?" I asked, genuinely confused. "I call you every morning on my way to work and every evening to check in. I take you to all your doctor's appointments. I handle your bills and insurance paperwork. I include you in every holiday and birthday celebration." "It's different with Marlene," Mom said dismissively. "She understands me. And I don't. After everything I've done." I could hear my voice rising but couldn't seem to control it. "I've put my own financial security at risk to help you. I've delayed home repairs, postponed medical care for myself, worked overtime until midnight most days to earn extra money, all so I could help you keep your house." Troy snorted. "And now you want recognition and praise for doing what any daughter should do. Typical Denise, always keeping score." "I don't want praise," I said quietly. "I just want acknowledgement that I've been contributing, that I matter too." "Of course you matter," Mom said with a wave of her hand. "Nobody said you don't matter." "You didn't even thank me in the prayer for the meal I spent 3 days cooking," I pointed out. "You thanked Marlene, who brought nothing but 2 bottles of wine and some napkin rings." "Here we go again," Marlene sighed dramatically. "The Thanksgiving police, making sure everyone expresses gratitude according to Denise's exacting standards." "That's not what I meant." I started to explain, but Mom cut me off. "Enough," she said sharply. "I will not have my Thanksgiving ruined by your constant need for attention and validation, Denise." "My need for attention?" I echoed in disbelief. "I'm not the one who changed the seating arrangement to put myself next to you. I'm not the one who invited friends without telling anyone. I'm not the one who takes credit for other people's work." "You see," Mom said, turning to the others, "this is what she's always been like. Dramatic, keeping score, making everything about herself." "I think," I said carefully, measuring each word, "that I have bent over backwards for this family. I have sacrificed my own needs and often my children's needs to support you financially. And all I've ever wanted in return was to be treated with the same respect and consideration that you show Marlene automatically." "If you're so unhappy with the arrangement," Mom said coldly, "perhaps you should stop helping. Nobody is forcing you." "Maybe I will," I replied, surprising myself with the words. "Maybe it's time I prioritized my own children instead of pouring resources into someone who doesn't even appreciate it." "Such a victim," Marlene muttered. "Denise," Mom said, her voice suddenly icy, "I think you should leave." I stared at her. "What?" "You heard me. Take your children and go. You've ruined Thanksgiving with your selfishness." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're asking me to leave after I cooked this entire meal after everything I've done. Marlene is my real child, Mom said, rising from her chair and pointing toward the door. You've always been difficult, always been demanding. Marlene gives without expecting anything in return. You keep score of every penny, every favor. The table fell silent. Even Marlene looked momentarily shocked by Mom's words. Emma began crying softly beside me. Jake looked up at me with wide, confused eyes. Mommy, he whispered, why doesn't Grandma love us? His innocent question broke something inside me. I stood slowly. Get your coats, kids, I said quietly. We're leaving. Yes, you are, Mom confirmed, already walking toward the entryway. And don't bother coming for Christmas either. I think we all need a break from your martyrdom complex. I helped the children into their jackets, my movements mechanical as I struggled to process what was happening. Emma was crying openly now, and Jake looked on the verge of tears himself. As we headed for the door, Mom held it open, her expression cold and unfamiliar. The woman who stood there was a stranger wearing my mother's face. Maybe after some time apart you'll learn to be more like your sister, she said as we walked past. I hope not, I replied honestly. Troy and James had returned to discussing stocks, already moving past the uncomfortable scene. Patricia was examining her purse for water damage. Marlene stood in the dining room doorway, a strange, satisfied expression on her face. The door slammed behind us with such force that both children jumped. We stood on the porch in the cold November air, the sounds of conversation and laughter already resuming inside. Through the window, I could see them returning to the table to the meal I had prepared, continuing Thanksgiving, as if we had never been there at all. The drive home was silent, except for the occasional sniffles from the back seat. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, focusing intently on the road to keep myself from breaking down in front of the children. At a stoplight, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Emma was staring out the window, tears streaming down her face. Jake was looking down at his hands, his small shoulders hunched forward. Mom. Emma's voice was small. Did we do something wrong? My heart cracked. No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. Neither of you did. Then why was Grandma so mean? Jake asked, looking up with confusion in his eyes. I took a deep breath. Sometimes adults have complicated feelings that have nothing to do with children. Grandma and I have some grown-up issues to work through. She said Aunt Marlene is her real child, Emma said, her voice trembling. Aren't you her real child too? The light turned green and I drove forward, buying myself a few seconds to formulate an answer. Yes, I am. Grandma was just very upset and said something hurtful that she didn't really mean. Even as I said the words, I knew they weren't true. Mom had meant exactly what she said. The realization felt like ice water in my veins. We were halfway home when Jake's stomach growled audibly. I'm hungry, Mom. We didn't really eat dinner. I glanced at the clock. It was only 5:45. How about we stop for some food? We can have our own Thanksgiving dinner. Can we go to Denny's? Emma asked, perking up slightly. They have turkey dinners today. That sounds perfect, I agreed, changing lanes to take the next exit. The restaurant was busy but not packed. We were seated in a booth near the back, surrounded by other families and individuals who, for whatever reason, weren't having a traditional Thanksgiving at home. An older waitress with kind eyes took our order. Turkey dinners for all of us, with chocolate milk for the kids and coffee for me. Rough day, honey? She asked quietly as the children studied the placemats with word searches on them. You could say that, I replied with a weak smile. She patted my shoulder. Family holidays can be the hardest. I'll get your order in right away. When our food arrived, I made a show of serving the children their turkey and mashed potatoes. Look, we're having Thanksgiving dinner after all, I said with forced cheerfulness. Jake dug in immediately, but Emma studied me across the table. At 10, she was perceptive beyond her years. Are you okay, Mom? She asked. I considered lying, then decided against it. Not really, sweetie, but I will be. We all will be. I'm sorry Grandma was mean to you, she said solemnly. Thank you, I replied, reaching across to squeeze her hand. But please know that how Grandma treated us today has nothing to do with you or Jake. You two are perfect, and I'm so proud to be your mom. We ate our dinner, and I encouraged the kids to talk about their upcoming school activities. Jake had a field trip to the Science Museum next week. Emma was trying out for the winter choir concert. By the time we paid the bill, their spirits had lifted somewhat. Mine hadn't, but I maintained a calm exterior for their sake. Arriving home felt strange. Our small house seemed emptier than usual, the absence of Thanksgiving decorations and the smell of holiday cooking making it feel like any ordinary evening. "How about we build a blanket fort in the living room and watch a movie?" I suggested as we hung our coats in the closet. "Can we make popcorn?" Jake asked, already sounding excited. "Absolutely," I promised. For the next hour, we transformed the living room with every blanket and pillow in the house. We strung fairy lights inside the fort and made a huge bowl of popcorn with extra butter. We crowded inside with our favorite stuffed animals and watched How to Train Your Dragon, a movie that had nothing to do with Thanksgiving or family drama. By the end of the movie, both kids were yawning. I helped them brush their teeth and change into pajamas, then tucked them into their beds instead of sleeping in the fort as they'd initially wanted. "Try to get some sleep," I told Emma as I kissed her forehead. "Tomorrow's a new day." "Will we ever see Grandma again?" she asked sleepily. "We'll figure that out later," I said, not wanting to make promises I couldn't keep. "For now, let's just focus on us three, okay?" After making sure both children were asleep, I returned to the living room. The blanket fort stood in the center, a testament to our attempt to salvage the day. I crawled inside with my phone and finally allowed the tears to come. They flowed silently at first, then in heaving sobs that I muffled with a pillow. 20 years of trying to earn my mother's approval, of making excuses for her favoritism, of believing that if I just did more, gave more, sacrificed more, she would finally see me as worthy of the same love she gave Marlene so freely. When the tears finally subsided, I felt hollow but somehow clearer. I opened my email on my phone and found a message from my manager about an upcoming project. Work emails at 10:30 on Thanksgiving night. That had been my life for years now. On impulse, I opened my file app and navigated to the folder where I kept financial records. There it was, a folder labeled Mom's Expenses. I opened it and scrolled through spreadsheets documenting every payment, every loan, every financial gift over the past 3 years. The total was staggering, nearly $70,000 since David left. Money that could have gone toward my children's college funds. Money that could have bought us a more comfortable home. Money that could have given us security and peace of mind. And then I saw it. A document I had nearly forgotten about. 3 years ago, when Mom's roof needed replacing, she hadn't qualified for a home equity loan because of her poor credit score. I had co-signed on a new mortgage that consolidated her debt and provided cash for the roof repair. My name was on her mortgage. I was legally responsible for that debt if she failed to pay. I had been making the payments for her most months anyway, but seeing the document now triggered a realization. I had power in this situation that I hadn't acknowledged before. I closed the financial documents and opened my contacts. It was late, but I knew Angela, my friend from college who had become a family law attorney, would still be up. "Denise," she answered, sounding surprised. "Everything okay? It's Thanksgiving." "I know, and I'm sorry for calling so late," I replied. "But I need some legal advice and I'm hoping you can help." "Of course," she said, her tone shifting to professional concern. "What's going on?" I explained the situation with the mortgage, the money I'd been providing, and the events of the day. Angela listened without interrupting, only asking occasional clarifying questions. "First," she said when I finished, "I'm so sorry that happened to you and your kids. That's genuinely awful." "Thank you," I replied, feeling validated for the first time all day. "Second, regarding the mortgage, you actually have several options. As a co-signer, you have certain rights but also significant responsibilities. You're jointly liable for the debt, which means your credit is affected by any late payments." "I know," I said. "That's why I've been making the payments when she can't." "But you're not obligated to continue doing so indefinitely," Angela explained. "You could request to be removed from the mortgage, though the bank would have to approve that based on your mother's financial situation." "Which they probably wouldn't," I interjected, "given her limited income." "Probably not," Angela agreed. "Another option is to formally document all the payments you've made as loans rather than gifts, which could give you some legal standing to recoup those funds, eventually possibly through a lien on the property." We discussed options for nearly an hour. By the end of the call, I had a clear understanding of my legal position and a plan forward. "Thank you so much," I told Angela. "This has been incredibly helpful." "Just remember," she said before hanging up, "financial decisions and family relationships are separate issues. You can make the best financial decision for yourself and your children while still leaving room for relationship healing, if that becomes possible later." After ending the call, I sat in the quiet of the blanket fort, surrounded by fairy lights and the remnants of our makeshift holiday. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of clarity and purpose. I had spent so long trying to earn love through sacrifice and financial support. I had taught my children through my example that it was normal to give endlessly to people who showed no gratitude or reciprocity. I had perpetuated a dynamic that was unhealthy for all of us. It was time for that to change. Tomorrow, I would begin taking back my power, my resources, and my sense of self-worth, for my children's sake and for my own. I woke early the next morning, Black Friday, though I had no intention of shopping. The children were still asleep, exhausted from the emotional day before. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop formulating my plan. First, I called the bank that held my mother's mortgage. After navigating the automated system and explaining my situation to two different representatives, I was finally connected to someone in the mortgage department. "I understand you're a co-signer on this loan," the representative confirmed after verifying my identity. "What can we help you with today?" "I need to understand my options for removing myself from this mortgage," I explained. "I've been making most of the payments, but I need to step back from that responsibility." "I see," she replied. "Unfortunately, removing a cosigner typically requires refinancing the loan, which would be initiated by the primary borrower." "Are there any other options available to me as the cosigner?" I pressed. We discussed possibilities for nearly 30 minutes. The representative was surprisingly helpful, explaining that while I couldn't remove myself unilaterally, I could officially notify the bank that I would no longer be making payments, which would at least document my intent to withdraw financial support. "The primary borrower will be notified that they are solely responsible for making payments going forward," she explained. "If payments are missed, it will affect both your credit scores, but having this documentation can sometimes help in disputes later." I completed the necessary paperwork online, providing detailed records of the payments I had made over the years. I scheduled an appointment with a loan officer for the following week to discuss additional options. Next, I called the utility companies where I had set up automatic payments for my mother. One by one, I canceled the payment arrangements, ensuring that future bills would go directly to her. By the time Emma padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes, I had spent 2 hours reclaiming my financial independence. "Morning, Mom," she said, climbing onto a chair across from me. "What are you doing?" "Just taking care of some grown-up things," I replied, closing my laptop. "How did you sleep?" "Okay," she shrugged. "I had a dream about Grandma." My stomach tightened. "Do you want to talk about it?" She considered this for a moment, then nodded. "In my dream, Grandma came to our house and said she was sorry. She brought us a turkey that wasn't burnt." I smiled sadly. "That's a nice dream." "Is Grandma going to say sorry in real life?" she asked, her eyes wide and hopeful. I chose my words carefully. "I don't know, sweetie. Sometimes adults have a hard time saying sorry even when they should. Like when Tyler pushed me on the playground and his mom made him say sorry even though he didn't want to." "Something like that," I agreed. "But much more complicated." Jake joined us a few minutes later, his hair sticking up in all directions, his favorite stuffed dinosaur tucked under his arm. "Can we have pancakes?" he asked, apparently having moved past yesterday's drama with the resilience of a 7-year-old. "Absolutely," I replied, grateful for the distraction. We spent the morning making pancakes shaped like animals and watching cartoons. I deliberately kept my phone on silent, needing space from the outside world as I processed my new direction. Around noon, it began to buzz repeatedly on the counter. I checked it to find 6 missed calls from my mother and several text messages, each more urgent than the last. "Call me immediately." "What did you do?" "The bank called me." "Answer your phone, Denise." "This is completely irresponsible." I put the phone down without responding and returned to the living room where the kids were building with Legos. Who kept calling? Emma asked, perceptive as always. Grandma, I said honestly. She's upset about some changes I made. Are you going to call her back? Jake asked. Not right now, I replied. Right now, I'm spending time with you guys. We spent the afternoon playing board games and making Christmas lists. Around 3, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Marlene. What the hell did you do? She demanded when I answered. Mom is having a complete meltdown. I removed myself financially from a situation that wasn't healthy for me or my children, I replied calmly. By canceling all her utilities and mortgage payments without warning. Marlene's voice rose. That's cruel, Denise, even for you. I didn't cancel her mortgage, I clarified. I simply informed the bank that I would no longer be making payments on her behalf. The responsibility returns to her where it always should have been. You know she can't afford those payments on her own, Marlene exclaimed. What is she supposed to do? The same thing most adults do, I replied evenly. Budget her income, reduce expenses where possible, and seek additional income if needed. Or she could ask her real child for help. Marlene was silent for a moment. This is about what Mom said yesterday, isn't it? She was upset. You know she didn't mean it. She meant it, Marlene, I said softly. She's shown me through her actions for decades that she meant it. Yesterday was just the first time she said it out loud. So this is revenge. Marlene's tone was accusatory. Financially abandoning our mother because your feelings got hurt. This isn't revenge, I countered. This is me prioritizing my children's needs over someone who has made it clear that she doesn't value me or them. The $24,000 I spent supporting Mom this year could have gone to Emma's braces, Jake's asthma medication home repairs, or their college funds. So, what exactly do you expect to happen now? Marlene asked. I expect that as Mom's real child, you'll step up and help her the way I've been doing for years, I replied honestly. Or not. That's your choice. But I'm done sacrificing my children's well-being for someone who can throw us out of Thanksgiving dinner after everything I've done. You're being ridiculous, Marlene snapped. I can't believe you'd do this to your own mother. I can't believe what she did to her own daughter and grandchildren, I countered. Actions have consequences, Marlene, for all of us. After hanging up, I sat quietly for a moment, surprised by my own composure. For years, I would have been racked with guilt and anxiety over standing up for myself. Now I felt a strange sense of peace. Over the next week, the calls and texts continued. Mom alternated between fury and tearful manipulation. Marlene oscillated between self-righteous anger and grudging acknowledgement that perhaps she could contribute a little to Mom's expenses. I've set up a meeting with the bank to discuss Mom's options, Marlene told me during one of our tense phone calls. But Troy and I aren't in a position to take on a mortgage payment that size. Interesting, I replied. You weren't in this position when you took 2 vacations to Cancun this year. Marlene's silence spoke volumes. Troy called once, his tone condescending, as he suggested I was having some sort of emotional breakdown and should reconsider before doing permanent damage to the family. I listened politely, then replied, Thank you for your concern, Troy. I'm actually doing better emotionally than I have in years. As for family damage, that ship sailed when my mother told me I wasn't her real child and threw my children out of Thanksgiving dinner. 1 month after Thanksgiving, I received a letter from Mom. Her handwriting was shaky, the tone oscillating between accusatory and plaintive. I don't understand how you could abandon me like this, she wrote. After everything I've done for you, raising you alone after your father left, sacrificing my own happiness for yours. Now when I need help the most, you turn your back on me. The letter continued with revisionist history about her sacrifices and my supposed ingratitude. There was no acknowledgement of her hurtful words or actions, no apology for the pain she had caused my children. I wrote a brief response. Mom, I love you and always will, but I can no longer participate in a relationship that causes harm to me or my children. If you'd like to discuss rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms, I'm open to that conversation, preferably with a family therapist present. In the meantime, I've made the decision to prioritize my children's needs, just as you always prioritized Marlene's. I didn't receive a reply. December brought the first Christmas without extended family. The children asked about Grandma occasionally, and I answered honestly, but age appropriately. Grandma and I are taking some space from each other right now. Sometimes adults need that to figure things out. Instead of our usual Christmas traditions, we created new ones. We volunteered at a local food bank on Christmas Eve. We invited 2 single-parent families from the children's school for Christmas dinner. We started a new tradition of giving each other experiences, rather than things wrapping up handmade vouchers for ice skating museum visits and movie nights. As winter turned to spring, the financial benefits of my decision became increasingly apparent. I was able to schedule Emma's first orthodontist appointment for braces. I replaced our aging refrigerator that had been making concerning noises for months. I started a modest but growing college fund for each child. Through mutual acquaintances, I heard that Marlene and Troy had indeed stepped up somewhat, covering Mom's property taxes and some utilities. Mom had taken a part-time job at a local florist to supplement her Social Security income. The house wasn't in foreclosure, but sacrifices had been made, including Mom's annual summer vacation and her weekly hair appointments. In April, 6 months after that disastrous Thanksgiving, I received a call from an unexpected source. It was Patricia, the friend of Troy's who had been at the dinner. "Denise, this is Patricia Wilson. We met at your mother's house last Thanksgiving." "I remember," I replied, curious about the reason for her call. "I owe you an apology," she said, surprising me. "My behavior that day was judgmental and unkind, especially toward your children. I've thought about it many times since then." "Thank you," I said, genuinely moved by her unexpected contrition. "I appreciate that. The truth is," she continued, "after what happened, Troy and Marlene had a dinner party where they told everyone their version of events. They made you sound terrible, but even in their telling, I could see that you had been treated unfairly for a long time." We talked for nearly an hour. Patricia had apparently had her own reckoning with toxic family dynamics in the months since Thanksgiving. She had distanced herself from Troy and Marlene after witnessing similar behavior patterns in other contexts. "Life's too short to spend it with people who don't value you," she concluded. "I admire how you stood up for yourself and your children." That conversation was unexpectedly healing. Having an outside observer validate my experience and decision helped quiet the lingering doubts that occasionally surfaced, especially on difficult days. In May, I received another letter from Mom. This one was different. "Denise," it began, "the past 6 months have been difficult. I've had to make many adjustments and face some uncomfortable truths about myself and our family dynamics. While I still believe you could have handled things differently, I recognize that my words and actions at Thanksgiving were inexcusable. I said things no mother should ever say to her child, and I deeply regret the pain I caused you and the children." It wasn't a complete acknowledgement or apology, but it was a start. She concluded by asking if we could meet for coffee, just to talk. I responded with a suggestion that we meet with a family therapist, present a boundary I was committed to maintaining. To my surprise, she agreed. Our first session was tense and difficult. Mom still struggled to fully acknowledge her favoritism or its impact. The therapist skillfully guided the conversation, helping us communicate more effectively than we ever had before. "What I hear Denise saying," the therapist summarized at one point, "is that she felt valued primarily for what she could provide financially, while Marlene was valued inherently for who she was. That's a painful dynamic for any child, even an adult child." Mom was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't see it that way," she finally said. "I always thought Denise was the strong one, the capable one. She didn't need me the way Marlene did." "I did need you," I replied, my voice breaking slightly. "I needed your approval, your affection, your support. I just learned early on not to ask for it directly." It was a beginning, just a first step on what would clearly be a long road. We agreed to continue therapy with no immediate plans for resuming regular family gatherings. The children and I maintained our distance, though I did allow a brief supervised visit after several more productive therapy sessions. Emma and Jake approached their grandmother warily at first, but children's capacity for forgiveness often exceeds adults. By the end of the visit, Jake was showing her his new video game, though Emma remained more reserved. "We'll take it slow," I told them afterward. "Grandma is working on some things just like all of us are always working to be better people." As spring turned to summer, I continued to see the benefits of my decision in both practical and emotional terms. My stress levels decreased dramatically once I was no longer responsible for two households. I slept better. I laughed more. I was more present with my children. The money I had previously sent to mom now went toward swimming lessons for the kids' occasional babysitters, so I could enjoy an evening out with friends and a small but growing emergency fund that provided peace of mind I hadn't experienced in years. Marlene and I maintained minimal contact, though I heard through mom that she and Troy had indeed taken over some financial responsibilities. Apparently contributing to family expenses had created tension in their marriage, with Troy resisting what he called throwing money into a bottomless pit. I felt a twinge of sympathy for my sister, recognizing that she was now experiencing some of the pressure I had carried alone for years. But mostly, I felt relief that the burden was finally being shared more equitably. As Thanksgiving approached, again bringing the anniversary of our family rupture, I found myself reflecting on everything that had changed in a year. The children and I decided to host our own Thanksgiving dinner, inviting friends who had become chosen family over the past year. My colleague Sarah and her teenage son, who had recently moved to town. Our neighbors, the Garcias, whose extended family lived overseas. Angela, my lawyer friend, who had helped me navigate the financial disentanglement. We spent days cooking together, the children far more involved than they had been the previous year. Jake mastered the art of mashed potatoes, while Emma discovered a talent for pie crust. Our dining room table, smaller than mom's but filled with more genuine warmth, looked beautiful with simple decorations we had made together. As we gathered around that table, I looked at the faces of people who chose to be with us, who valued us for who we were, rather than what we could provide. I thought about the journey of the past year, the pain that had led to growth, the loss that had made room for new connections. When we went around the table sharing what we were thankful for, I spoke from my heart. I'm thankful for difficult lessons that led to necessary changes. I'm thankful for the courage to prioritize what truly matters. I'm thankful for my children who showed me what unconditional love really looks like. And I'm thankful for all of you who have become family through choice rather than obligation. Emma squeezed my hand under the table. Jake beamed at me from across the table. In their faces, I saw not just love, but respect. I had shown them through my actions that we all deserve to be treated with dignity, that sacrifice should not come at the expense of self-respect, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is set boundaries with those we love. The road ahead would not be easy. Rebuilding a healthier relationship with mom would take time if it was possible at all. Marlene and I might never fully repair our fractured sisterhood. There would be difficult conversations and uncomfortable moments in the future. But sitting there surrounded by genuine affection and respect, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right choice. By refusing to continue in an unhealthy pattern, I had opened the door to a new way of living. By canceling financial obligations that had become emotional chains, I had freed not just my resources, but my spirit. Sometimes the most profound act of love is saying no to what harms you, so you can say yes to what helps you thrive. That was the lesson I would carry forward, the legacy I would pass to my children, and the truth that had transformed my life. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that hurt in the moment but led to freedom and growth? How did you find the courage to prioritize your well-being when others made you feel selfish for doing so? Please share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and self-discovery. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you deserve to be valued for who you are, not just what you can give to others.